Could the use of elephants by the Union Army during the Civil War have changed certain outcomes? Personally, I doubt that the addition of such creatures would have done anything but bring about their own demise on the American continent. However, it is an interesting thought. Throughout history, elephants had been a staple of warfare for the parts of the world that contained these gentle giants. In places like India and Southeast Asia, their use was extremely common. A key feature, in fact, beside your infantry, cavalry, and chariots. And if you've had any interest in Alexander the Great at all, you would have heard of his encounters with the war elephants as he neared the Indian subcontinent, and his reluctance to continue due to the sheer numbers Indian kings were able to mobilize. Thousands. Likewise, elephants have been utilized in the modern era of warfare, in a non-combative role as giant pack animals. In World War II, elephants were used as draft animals on the Indian front, pulling supplies, artillery, and planes to runways. When the fuel ran out and the war dragged on, elephants were tasked with easing logistical problems. So why elephants and the Civil War? Because the King of Siam had offered Lincoln some. In the late 1850s, early 1860s, far away from the motherland, American diplomats and naval captains were making contact with the distant lands of Asia. We've all heard of the policy of gunboat diplomacy, which was used to open the formerly isolationist shogunate of Japan to Western trade. In Siam, which is modern-day Thailand, this was not the case because of the action of their king, Mongkut. King Mongkut was a shrewd and intelligent ruler who found himself at the cusp of a changing world. In response, he set about modernizing his country. As a monk, he dedicated his life to various forms of study, including the study of Western sciences. Upon coming to the throne, he knew he had an important task of balancing interacting with Western influences like the British and the Americans, and maintaining sovereignty over his country so as not to be undermined or colonized like so many other peoples. So he hired missionaries to teach and reform the school system. He hired foreign mercenaries to train his troops and reform the military, and brought in new technologies like the printing press to bring about social changes, and stayed on good terms with the various powers in the area. As a side note, he also had 82 kids. So as a show of friendship, President James Buchanan sent a gift of 192 books to the Siamese sovereign. Pleased by this gift of knowledge, the king replied by sending a sword with a golden scabbard, a portrait of himself with the future king, and a pair of elephant tusks, as well as the famous letter which sparked the whole question of elephants in America. These treasures and the letter were given to Captain Berrien of the USS John Adams, who set sail from Bangkok in July of 1861 and returned to New York in January of 1862. While meeting with the king, Captain Berrien had enthused about the gift of elephant tusks and said people in America would come for miles around to see these strange items. With this in mind, King Mongkut made it a point of interest in his letter to Buchanan, or to whomever the people had elected anew as chief ruler in his place, that elephants are the most remarkable of animals. This came with his idea and offer to send a few male and female elephants to America to see if they could inhabit the forests of the US and eventually become as numerous as they were in Southeast Asia. If so, he said, they could be raised and tamed and used as beasts of burden to benefit the country. So, his offer was simple. He was willing to send the animals if the US was willing to provide transport, food, etc. 6 months later, the gifts and letter would arrive in Washington. Who knows how Abraham Lincoln, when he received these items and read this letter for the first time, maybe he was uplifted by the novelty of this situation and the graciousness of this distant king. Maybe it was a breath of fresh air for the man partway through the struggle of dragging his country through the thick smoke and stench of blood and sulfur that was the American Civil War. We can never know the immediate innermost reactions of this great man. However, we can read his response to King Mongkut. I quote, "To the King of Siam, February 3rd, 1862, Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, to His Majesty, Somdech Phra Paramender Maha Mongkut, King of Siam. Great and good friend, I have received your Majesty's 2 letters of the date of February 14th, 1861. I have also received in good condition the royal gifts which accompanied these letters, namely, a sword of costly materials and exquisite workmanship, a photographic likeness of your Majesty and your Majesty's beloved daughter, and also 2 elephant tusks of length and magnitudes such as indicate that they could have belonged only to an animal which was native of Siam. Your Majesty's letter shows an understanding that our laws forbid the President from receiving these rich gifts as personal treasures. They are therefore accepted in accordance with your Majesty's desire as tokens of your goodwill and friendship for the American people. Congress being now in session at this capital, I had the great pleasure in making known to them this manifestation of your Majesty's munificence and kind consideration. Under their directions, the gifts will be placed among the archives of the government, where they will remain perpetually as tokens of mutual esteem and pacific dispositions, more honorable to both nations than any trophies of conquest could be. I appreciate highly your Majesty's tender of good offices in forwarding this government a stock from which a supply of elephants might be raised on our own soil. This government would not hesitate to avail itself of so generous an offer if the object were one which could be made practically useful in the present condition of the United States. Our political jurisdiction, however, does not reach a latitude so low as to favor the multiplication of the elephant, and the steam on land as well as in the water has been our best and most efficient agent of transport in internal commerce. I shall have occasion at no distant day to transmit your Majesty some token of indication of the high sense which this government entertains of your Majesty's friendship. Meantime, wishing for your Majesty a long and happy life, and for the generous, emulous people of Siam the highest possible prosperity, I commend both to the blessing of the Almighty God. Your good friend, Abraham Lincoln. Washington, February 3rd, 1862. So no elephants ever did leave their Siamese homeland to graze in the forests of America, but the letter and offer have found their way into the realm of myth and embellishment due to their odd nature and the seriousness of the time.